The brake lights flared red against the gray morning, and 31 children lurched forward in their seatbelts as Bus 14 came to a halt in the middle of Cutter's Mill Road, a full quarter-mile before the turn onto Ashgrove Lane, where it was supposed to stop. Marisol Vance felt her stomach drop before she understood why. She was 26, 3 years into driving this route, and she had never once stopped anywhere but the marked yellow squares painted on the asphalt. She knew this road the way she knew the calluses on her own palms, every pothole, every mailbox, every place where the tree line pulled close enough to brush the mirrors. But she had seen something in the woods. Not a deer, not a shadow thrown by wind, a stillness that didn't belong there. The kind of stillness you learn to notice if you've ever lost something and spent months scanning tree lines out of habit you can't switch off. "Ms. Vance?" A small voice from 3 rows back. Tobias Reyes, 7 years old, missing his front tooth, forehead pressed to the window glass. "Why'd we stop?" "Everyone stay in your seats," Marisol said, and she was proud of how steady her voice came out, because her hands on the wheel were not steady at all. "I just need 1 second," she radioed dispatch. 14 to base. "I have an unscheduled stop on Cutter's Mill. I need eyes on my location." Static. Then Denise's voice, clipped with irritation, before concern had time to catch up. "Marisol, you're already behind schedule for the Ashgrove stop. What's going on? I saw something in the trees. I need someone to check it." "Something like what?" Marisol didn't answer right away, because what she'd seen was a flash of pink. A child's jacket, maybe. Or nothing at all. Her mind playing the cruelest kind of trick, the kind it had played on her before, in the 18 months since her own daughter Iris had wandered off at a county fair and been found 4 hours later, unharmed, asleep behind a funnel cake stand. Marisol had aged a decade in those 4 hours. She had never fully come back from them. She was 30 seconds from putting the bus back in gear and telling herself it was nothing when she saw it again. Not pink. Movement. Low, deliberate. Someone crouching, then still. "I'm going to look," she said into the radio. "Tell parents I'm going to be late. Do not let anyone panic." That last instruction, of course, was already too late. By the time Marisol had radioed the school had radioed the district, and the district, through some clumsy, well-meaning chain of miscommunication, had sent a mass text to parents reading, "Bus 14 delayed due to unscheduled stop. Driver has left vehicle. Please remain calm." Nothing calms a parent faster than being told to remain calm. Grant Okafor was the first to arrive, tires screeching onto the shoulder of Cutter's Mill Road, 11 minutes later, badge and gun still on his hip from a shift he'd been called off of. He wasn't a cop that day. He was a father whose son Mateo was on that bus, and the 11 minutes between the text and his arrival had contained more fear than his 6 years on patrol combined. He found Marisol standing at the edge of the tree line, 30 feet from the open bus door, her posture rigid, one hand raised, not in surrender, but in the universal gesture for wait, don't move, don't speak. "Where is he?" Grant said. Not a question, his voice already breaking in the middle. "Everyone's on the bus," Marisol said without turning around. "All 31 kids, all accounted for. I checked twice. It's not them." "Then what?" "There's someone in there." Her voice dropped. "A kid. Alone. I don't think she's supposed to be there." Other cars were arriving now, the frantic geometry of minivans and pickup trucks pulled crooked onto the shoulder, doors thrown open before engines had fully stopped. Word had done what word does in small towns, turned a delay into a crisis into a rumor into a dozen different stories, each one worse than the last. Denise Okonkwo Price, PTA president and mother of twin girls on that bus, arrived already recording on her phone, already narrating for an audience that didn't exist yet. "This woman just stopped the bus in the middle of the road," she said to no one. To everyone. "In the road. with our children on it. She wasn't wrong to be angry. Marisol understood that, even as it happened to her, understood it with the particular clarity of someone who had once, 18 months ago, been on the other side of exactly this kind of fear. She had screamed at a fairground security guard once, grabbed his shirt, called him useless. He had been trying to help her the whole time. She left the bus, Denise said, louder now, for the small crowd gathering behind her. She left 30 children unsupervised on an active road to go wandering into the woods. Does anyone else think that's insane? Someone call the district office right now. Denise. This, from Halima Voss, a physical therapist with 2 boys aboard, her voice quieter, but carrying the particular weight of someone who chose her words. Look at her face. Denise looked. Marisol's expression was not the expression of a woman who'd made an impulsive, reckless choice. It was the expression of someone doing long division in her head, someone counting seconds, someone holding herself together through pure force of will, while looking at something the rest of them couldn't yet see. "There's a kid in there," Marisol said again, to the gathering crowd this time, because she understood that answers were the only thing that would slow the panic down. "Not one of ours. I saw movement. I need someone to help me get her without scaring her further into the trees." The crowd's anger didn't vanish. It transformed, the particular alchemy of fear finding a more useful shape. "Whose kid?" someone asked. "I don't know yet." Grant Okafor, badge still clipped uselessly to a belt for a job he wasn't technically working, stepped past Marisol toward the tree line, then stopped, because 20 feet in, half obscured by a fallen birch, a child was watching them. She was perhaps 8 years old, barefoot, wearing a nightgown gone gray with dirt and 3, maybe 4 days of exposure, though nobody would know the precise count until later. Her hair had been in braids once. Now it hung in matted ropes around a face that had learned, with a speed no child should have to learn anything, to show absolutely nothing. "Hi," Marisol said, crouching, making herself smaller, unthreatening, a shape the girl might recognize as safe. "Hi, sweetheart. My name's Marisol. I drive a school bus. Do you want to see it? It's yellow. Kids like the color." The girl didn't answer, but she didn't run either. And for Marisol, who had spent 4 hours once believing the worst thing a mother could believe, that stillness, that terrified, watchful stillness, was the most familiar thing in the world. They didn't rush her. That was the thing nobody in the growing crowd on Cutter's Mill Road quite understood in the moment. Why the woman they'd been furious with 20 minutes earlier was now the only person any of them trusted to get close. Marisol had lowered herself fully to the ground, knees in wet leaves, 20 feet still separating her from the girl, and she was talking, not about the girl, about the bus, about Tobias and his missing tooth, about the twins who always argued over the window seat, about the boy who once brought a garden snake in his backpack and released it during a spelling test. "I have a daughter," Marisol said eventually, and this part wasn't performance. "Her name's Iris. She's 6. Once she wandered off from me at the county fair and I thought, for 4 hours, I thought the absolute worst thing a person can think. And then we found her. She was fine. She'd fallen asleep behind a funnel cake stand because the noise scared her and she didn't know how to find me, so she found somewhere quiet instead." The girl's eyes moved, very slightly, toward Marisol's face. "You found somewhere quiet too," Marisol said. "That's smart. That's really smart, actually. I bet you've been smart this whole time." It was Halima who noticed the girl's feet, the raw, blistered state of them, the dried blood at one heel, and who moved without being asked to fetch the first aid kit from her minivan, the good one, the one she kept because her older son had a peanut allergy severe enough to require constant vigilance. She didn't approach. She set it down at a distance and retreated, understanding without being told that this required patience, not heroics. It took 11 minutes, an eternity measured against the fear of every adult on that road, and no time at all measured against what the girl had survived, before she took 2 steps out from behind the birch. "Etta," she said. Her voice was a rasp, water-starved and disused. "My name's Etta." "Hi, Etta." Marisol did not move closer. Let the girl close the last of the distance in her own time, on her own legs. "That's a beautiful name. Are you going to take me back?" Etta asked. And something in the way she asked it, flat, resigned, already braced for the answer to be yes, made 3 separate parents standing at the tree line go completely silent, the anger draining out of them so fast it left something colder behind. "Back where, sweetheart?" Etta didn't answer that. She looked instead at the bus, yellow and enormous and utterly incongruous against the gray woods behind her, and something in her face cracked open. Not fear this time, but a longing so raw it made Grant Okafor, 6 years a police officer, look away and press the heel of his hand against his eyes. "Can I ride the bus?" Etta asked. She rode in the front seat, wrapped in Halima's spare fleece blanket that lived in the minivan for exactly this kind of unimagined emergency, drinking water in small, careful sips because Marisol, remembering something from a first aid course years ago, wouldn't let her gulp it. The 31 children on bus 14 had gone, in the space of 20 minutes, from a delayed and irritated morning commute to a hushed, wide-eyed congregation. Nobody had told them to be quiet. They simply were, in the particular way children become quiet when they sense, correctly, that something enormous and serious is happening around them. Tobias Reyes, missing tooth and all, was the one who finally broke the silence. "Are you lost?" he asked Etta, leaning into the aisle from his seat. Etta looked at him for a long moment. "I don't know," she said. "I don't think I'm supposed to be found." Marisol's hands tightened on the wheel, though the bus was parked, though there was nothing to steer. She had called it in, actual authorities this time, not dispatch, and an ambulance was 11 minutes out, and county sheriff's deputies were coming behind them, and none of it felt fast enough. "Why would you think that?" Marisol asked gently, glancing at Etta in the rearview mirror she'd angled to see the front seat. Etta's hand went, unconsciously, to a thin cord around her neck. A shoelace, really, threaded through a small brass key that had clearly never opened anything in this child's memory. A family heirloom carried the way children carry things that mean home, when home itself has become dangerous. "He said if anyone found me, it meant I did something wrong," Etta said. "He said good girls don't get found." The bus was silent enough now that everyone heard it. Denise Okonkwo Price, standing just outside the open door with her phone, finally lowered and forgotten in her pocket, put a hand over her mouth. Grant Okafor's jaw worked once, twice, the muscle in his cheek jumping. "Whoever told you that," Marisol said, very carefully, very steadily, though her heart was doing something violent in her chest, "was wrong. Being found isn't a punishment, Etta. Being found is what happens when people love you and go looking." Etta looked at her for a long time. "You went looking," she said. "You stopped your whole bus." "I did." "Why?" Marisol thought of Iris behind the funnel cake stand, thought of 4 hours that had rearranged something permanent in her chest, thought of the particular vigilance that never fully leaves a mother who has once believed her child was gone. "Because I know what it's like to be the one looking," she said, "and because you looked like someone worth finding." Sheriff's deputies arrived 14 minutes later, followed closely by an ambulance, and the scene on Cutter's Mill Road transformed again. Official tape, radio chatter, a paramedic named Solveig Ibsen, crouching at Etta's level with the same unhurried patience Marisol had shown, checking vitals with hands gentle enough that Etta, remarkably, let her. It was Sheriff Colum Bramwell who pulled Marisol aside, notebook in hand, and asked her to walk him through it. The flash of movement, the decision to stop, the 11 minutes it took to coax a starved and terrified child out from behind a birch tree. "You did everything right," he told her, and Marisol, who had spent the last hour absorbing the fury of parents who believed she'd endangered their children, felt something in her chest loosen for the first time all morning. "I need to hear that from them too," she said, tilting her head toward the group of parents still clustered near the bus. She didn't have to wait long. Denise Okonkwo-Price approached first. The same woman who'd been narrating Marisol's supposed recklessness to an invisible audience less than an hour earlier, and there was nothing performative in her now. Her makeup had run. Her hands were shaking. "I said things," Denise started, then stopped, then tried again. "I said things I need to take back." "You were scared for your kids," Marisol said. "That's not something you need to apologize for. I called you insane, on camera. I was going to post it. Did you?" "No." Denise looked for a moment, genuinely young, stripped of the confidence that usually armored her at every PTA meeting and drop-off line. "I deleted it about 4 minutes after you said her name. Marisol, that little girl was 3 feet from us the entire time we were shouting about liability and schedules and, God, what if you'd just followed procedure? What if you'd just driven to the marked stop like you were supposed to?" "Then nobody finds her today," Marisol said quietly. "Maybe nobody finds her at all." Halima Voss joined them, still holding the empty first aid kit, like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands. "The blisters on her feet," she said, voice tight. "Solveig said some of them were old. Healed over, then reopened. She's been walking for days, maybe longer, through actual woods, in a nightgown." Nobody said anything for a moment. Behind them, in the ambulance, Etta sat wrapped in a real blanket now, a paramedic's stethoscope cold against her chest, her eyes finding Marisol through the open doors every few seconds, as though checking that she hadn't imagined the whole thing, that the bus, the woman, the sudden unbearable possibility of safety was still real. It took the sheriff's department 6 days to piece together where Etta had come from, and when they did, it explained both her silence and her fear, with a clarity that made several deputies, hardened by years on the job, go quiet in the briefing room. Her name was Etta Marchetti. She was 8 years old. She had not been reported missing because the man who'd taken her, a distant relative named Corvin Adair, her mother's estranged half-brother, who had appeared at a family funeral 18 months earlier and disappeared with Etta 3 weeks after that, using a custody loophole nobody had thought to close, had told everyone, including Etta's own grieving mother, that he was taking her somewhere safe. Somewhere quiet, a cabin upstate, away from the chaos of a family collapsing after a sudden death. For a while, it had even been true. Then Corvin's own unraveling had begun, a slow, private collapse into paranoia and isolation that turned a well-intentioned rescue into something else entirely. He had stopped answering calls from Etta's mother, then stopped taking her calls altogether, retreating deeper into a belief system that the outside world was corrupted, unsafe, coming for what remained of his family. He had homeschooled Etta with fragments of survivalist doctrine and half-remembered scripture. He had told her, again and again, that being found meant being taken, and being taken meant harm. 3 days before Marisol stopped her bus, Etta had run. Not toward anything, just away, through 14 miles of forest, sleeping in a culvert one night and a fallen tree the next, drinking from a stream she'd been taught, at least, to recognize as safe, until hunger and thirst, and something more stubborn than fear, had brought her close enough to a road to see, one gray morning, a yellow bus. She had almost run from that, too. "What made you stay?" Marisol asked her, weeks later, during one of the visits the county eventually approved, once Etta's mother, reunited with her daughter in a scene that occupied every local news outlet for exactly one respectful, tearful evening, had asked specifically for Marisol to be part of Etta's slow, careful return to trusting the world. Etta considered the question with the gravity she brought to everything now. the particular seriousness of a child who has learned that words carry weight. "You didn't try to grab me," she said. "Everyone I've seen on TV, when they find someone, they grab them. You just sat down. I didn't want to scare you." "I know." Etta picked at the frayed edge of a blanket, a real one now, from her own bed, in her mother's house, patterned with stars she'd chosen herself from a store. "That's why I stayed." Marisol went back to driving bus 14 the following Monday, though the district offered her paid leave, then counseling, then both, and she took the counseling and declined the leave because the alternative, sitting at home with nothing to do but replay 11 minutes at a tree line, felt more dangerous to her than the job itself. The children on her route treated her differently now, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet reverence that embarrassed her more than the anger ever had. Tobias Reyes brought her a drawing on his second day back, a yellow bus, a stick figure with dark hair standing at its door, and beside it, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, the words, "The bus that found Etta." She kept it taped inside the driver's compartment, where she could see it every morning. Denise Okonkwo Price organized a dinner 3 weeks later. Not a fundraiser, not a photo opportunity, just a dinner, at her own house, for Marisol and Grant and Halima and the handful of parents who'd been on Cutter's Mill Road that morning. It was, by all accounts, an awkward evening at first. 6 adults who'd shared 11 of the most frightening minutes of their lives trying to figure out how to talk about anything else. It was Grant who finally said what none of them had said aloud. "I called you insane in my head," he told Marisol, over a glass of wine he'd been turning without drinking. "Not out loud, not like Denise, but I thought it. My son was on that bus, and you'd stopped in the middle of the road and left the door open, and every instinct I had as a father and as a cop said that was wrong." "It was against every protocol I've ever been trained on," Marisol admitted. "I knew that while I was doing it." "Then why?" Marisol thought about it. Really thought. The way she hadn't quite let herself in the 6 weeks since. Too busy managing the aftermath, the interviews, the counseling sessions, Etta's careful, halting visits. "Because some rules exist to keep children safe," she said finally, "and some rules exist to keep adults comfortable. I've spent 18 months since Iris wandered off at that fair learning the difference. I didn't stop the bus because I broke a rule. I stopped it because I recognized what stillness in the woods actually looks like. Nobody trains you for that. You just have to have already lost something, I think, to know what it looks like when someone else is about to." Nobody at the table had a response to that. Halima reached over and refilled Marisol's glass without being asked, which was its own kind of answer. Iris was 7 now. Her birthday had come and gone in the chaos of the past 2 months, and she'd absorbed the story of Etta the way children absorb everything, in fragments at odd hours with questions that arrived sideways. "Mom," she said one evening, while Marisol braided her hair before bed, "was Etta scared the whole time she was in the woods?" "I think so, baby. Were you scared when you were looking for me, at the fair?" Marisol's hands stilled for a moment in her daughter's hair. "Yes," she said, "more scared than I've ever been in my whole life. But you found me. I found you." Iris twisted around to look at her mother directly, her expression serious in the particular way of children working through something larger than themselves. "Is that why you stopped the bus? Because you know how it feels when nobody's looking?" Marisol had been asked some version of this question by 3 separate journalists, a county psychologist, and her own mother over the past 2 months, and she'd given careful, measured answers to all of them. But her daughter's version cut cleaner than any of it. "Yes," she said simply, "that's exactly why." "I'm glad you stopped," Iris said, turning back around so Marisol could finish the braid. "Etta needed a mom to look for her too, even if you're not her mom." Marisol pressed a kiss to the crown of her daughter's head and said nothing for a long moment, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't break the careful composure she'd been maintaining, in public, for weeks. "No, she agreed finally, voice thick. I'm not her mom, but somebody needed to look anyway. Eda's mother, Priya Marchetti, asked to meet Marisol properly 6 weeks after the woods. Not in the county office where the reunion paperwork had been signed, not in front of cameras, but at her own kitchen table, with tea neither of them drank, and a plate of cookies Eda had insisted on baking herself, badly, with too much salt and not enough sugar, which Marisol ate every one of anyway. I keep trying to find the right way to thank you, Priya said, and every version sounds too small. You don't have to. I do, actually. Priya's hands were wrapped around her mug, knuckles pale. Do you know what the worst part was? Not knowing she was gone. Corvin called me every week for the first 4 months, told me she was thriving, sent me pictures of her reading, learning to identify birds, growing an inch. I believed him. I thought I'd made the right choice, letting her go somewhere quiet after her grandfather died, somewhere that wasn't full of my grief every single day. I thought I was protecting her. You couldn't have known. I should have called more. I should have visited. I let a grieving man's version of my daughter's happiness replace actually seeing her. Priya's voice cracked on the last word. You saw her in 11 minutes what I failed to see in 18 months. A child who was terrified, a child who needed someone to stop everything and just look. Marisol reached across the table and took Priya's hand, an instinct more than a decision. You're looking now, she said. That's what matters. Every day from here is you looking. From the next room came the sound of Eda's laughter, genuinely, freely, at something on the television Marisol couldn't see, and both women turned toward the sound the way plants turn toward light, unable to help themselves. She laughs now, Priya said, wonder still fresh in her voice, like she hadn't yet let herself trust it would last. She didn't, for the first 2 weeks. Now she laughs every day. A year to the day after the stop on Cutter's Mill Road, Marisol drove her usual route. 31 seats, mostly filled by different children now. A year moves fast in elementary school. Faces shift, grades change. But Tobias Reyes was still aboard, missing tooth long since replaced. His drawing of the yellow bus still taped where Marisol could see it each morning. Corners soft now from a year of handling. She had not seen Eda in 3 months. Priya had eased the visits down gradually, gently, as the county psychologist recommended, so that Eda's healing wouldn't become tangled up in the story of her rescue, so that she could grow into simply being a girl again, rather than the girl the whole town remembered from the woods. Marisol understood. She missed the visits anyway. It was Tobias, characteristically, who noticed the car following the bus's usual route that morning. A modest sedan, keeping careful pace 2 car lengths back, pulling in behind them at every stop. Ms. Vance, he said, that car's been behind us the whole way. Marisol checked her mirror at the next stop and felt something in her chest lift before she'd even fully processed why. Priya's car, and in the passenger seat, craning to see past the glare, a girl with hair grown long enough now for proper braids again, waving with both hands like she was trying to be seen from a mile away. Marisol opened the door. We were in the neighborhood, Priya called from the driver's seat, though her expression made clear this had been planned for weeks. Eda wanted to see the bus. Eda didn't wait for further invitation. She climbed the steps 2 at a time. Steady, sure-footed, nothing like the barefoot child who'd once stood frozen behind a fallen birch, and threw her arms around Marisol's waist with the unrestrained force of a child who'd relearned, over the past year, exactly how safe it was to hold on tightly to someone. I made honor roll, Eda announced, pulling back, beaming, missing none of her own front teeth, unlike Tobias a year prior. And I have a dog now. His name's Compass, because Mom said he'd make sure I never got lost again, which is kind of a joke but also kind of not. Compass is an excellent name, Marisol said, and found she had to blink several times before her vision cleared. I wanted to ask you something, Eda said, suddenly serious. the particular gravity she still carried into important moments. "Do you remember what you told me about being found?" "I remember. I tell people now," Etta said. "When kids at school are scared of something, or when they think nobody's looking for them, I tell them what you told me, that being found isn't a punishment, that it's what happens when people love you and go looking." Behind Etta, 31 children sat in unusual silence, the particular hush of an audience that senses it is witnessing something it will remember for a long time, though none of them, not even Tobias, who'd draw a second picture that very afternoon, would fully understand until years later just how much an 11-minute stop on Cutter's Mill Road had rearranged the shape of more than one life. "I'm proud of you," Marisol said, and meant it with a completeness that surprised her, given how briefly, in the grand accounting of a life, she had actually known this girl. "I'm proud of you too," Etta said. "You stopped your whole bus for me. Nobody's ever done anything like that before." Marisol crouched down, the way she had a year earlier at the edge of the woods, and looked at this child. Steady now, sure-footed, laughing daily, no longer disappearing into stillness at the edge of anything. "Anyone would have stopped," she said, "if they'd known what I knew. That sometimes the most important thing in the world is hiding exactly where nobody thinks to look. You just have to be paying attention." Epilogue. The brass key still hangs around Etta's neck, though its meaning has changed with time, as meanings do. It no longer represents a door that never opens, a home that was never safe. Priya had it properly fitted, eventually, to a small wooden box Etta keeps beside her bed. Inside it, a single photograph of a yellow school bus stopped in the middle of an empty road, taken by Halima Voss on a phone she'd forgotten she was still recording, on a gray morning when 31 children learned, before most adults ever do, what it looks like when someone refuses to look away. Marisol still drives bus 14. She still keeps Tobias's drawing taped where she can see it. And every morning, without exception, as she pulls onto Cutter's Mill Road, she glances once, just once, out of habit now more than fear, toward the tree line, where the woods stand exactly as still and exactly as ordinary as woods anywhere, holding nothing at all, because someone, once, had the courage to stop and check.
You know what gets me about this story? It wasn't a hero with a badge who found Etta. It wasn't a search party, or a headline, or luck. It was a school bus driver who trusted a feeling she couldn't explain. Marisol broke every rule in her handbook that morning, and for 11 minutes, an entire road full of parents thought she'd lost her mind. But here's what I keep thinking about. Sometimes the most important thing in the world is hiding exactly where nobody thinks to look. You just have to be paying attention. Etta didn't need someone to grab her. She needed someone to sit down and wait. And that's the whole story, isn't it? Being found isn't a punishment. It's what happens when someone refuses to look away. So here's my question for you, and I actually want to know, have you ever trusted a gut feeling that turned out to matter more than you realized? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We'll see you in the next story.